Hello and welcome. You are listening to Pint Size Therapy, where we explore all things related to mental health healing, personal growth and development, emotional wellness, and the human experience in pint-sized bites. I am your host, Dr. Aletha Clark, a licensed psychotherapist, certified hypnotherapist, and master addiction counselor, and I am happy to have you here with me today as you embark on your mental wellness journey. While I appreciate you tuning in, don't forget this podcast is informational only and is not a substitute for seeking out your own mental health counseling with a licensed professional. So join me as we jump into today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to part 4 of our series on codependence. In the last episode, we talked about the victim triangle of codependence and the cost of staying in codependent patterns, the exhaustion, the resentment, and the self-erasure that so many of us experience. Today, we're going to talk about how to break that cycle. We're going to explore what healthy boundaries look like, what it means to practice healthy detachment, and how to begin building self-worth outside of your relationship. I'll also share some of the recovery patterns of codependence outlined by CoDA, Codependence Anonymous, which give us practical direction for growth. So boundaries are one of the most powerful tools for breaking codependence, and many of us have already heard about boundaries, but many of us also misunderstand them. At the simplest level, a boundary is just a limit. It's a way of protecting your time, your energy, your values, and your emotional well-being. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but guidelines to help others understand how to treat you. They understand what you are or what you're not willing to accept. And boundaries are not about controlling another person. A boundary might sound like, I can't continue this conversation if you're yelling at me. I'm not available to lend you money. I need time to myself tonight. I'm not comfortable with that, or I can't take this on for you. Boundaries are about taking responsibility for yourself, not controlling another person. It's about defining what is acceptable for you and what isn't. They clarify where you are and another person actually begins. The challenge is that if you're codependent, boundaries often feel selfish or mean. But boundaries are actually an act of love, both for yourself and for your relationship. They create space for respect, for balance, and honesty to exist. So, why then are boundaries important in codependent relationships? In codependent relationships, boundaries are usually blurred or non-existent. The rescuer feels responsible for fixing, for saving, or managing the other person. And the rescued partner, they come to rely on that caretaking behavior. This creates an imbalance where one person is overfunctioning while the other one is underfunctioning. And without boundaries, several things actually happen. You begin to feel depleted, resentful, or invisible because your needs are consistently ignored. The other person is prevented from developing responsibility for their own life. And the relationship dynamic becomes really unstable. One person carries the load while the other never learns to stand on their own. And boundaries are the antidote. They disrupt the cycle by creating space for two whole people to exist in the relationship. They protect your well-being while also giving your partner the opportunity to take responsibility for themselves. So say, your partner frequently calls you in the middle of your workday to vent, expecting you to drop everything and actually soothe them. Without boundaries, you actually feel drained and distracted, but keep answering every time because you don't want to feel abandoned. A healthy boundary would sound like, I care about you, and I want to hear what's going on, but I can't talk during my work hours. Let's connect tonight after dinner instead. Another example, if your partner struggles with overspending and asks you to cover their bills, your boundary might be, I love you, but I'm not going to pay for this. I believe you can figure this out, and I'll support you in finding a solution that works for you. In both cases, the boundary honors your limits while still communicating care. It's not about punishment. It's about creating a healthier, more balanced relationship. So let's think about this for a minute. Let's take a quick personal inventory together. I want you to ask yourself these questions. Where in my life do I say yes when I really want to say no? Which relationships or situations leave me feeling drained instead of actually nourished? Where am I carrying responsibilities that don't truly belong to me? And what's one small boundary that I could set this week to protect my energy or my time? Take a moment to jot these down in a journal or even in notes in your phone. Boundaries don't just have to start big. They can even be the smallest no that can be the first step toward reclaiming your sense of self. The boundaries are essential in recovering from codependence because overall they break that pattern of over responsibility. They help you step out of the role of rescuer and allow the other person to grow. And just as importantly, they send a powerful message to yourself. My needs, my time, and my energy matter. So let's talk about detachment. Detachment is another essential part of breaking the cycle of codependence, but it's often misunderstood. Many people hear detachment and think it means shutting down, ignoring, or punishing the other person. But that's withdrawal, and it often fuels more conflict. Healthy detachment is different. It's not about building walls. It's about releasing the belief that you are responsible for someone else's choices, their feelings, or their recovery. Healthy detachment means that you allow others to experience the natural consequences of their choices. You're not always their parachute. It's about letting go of the belief that it's your job to rescue, fix, or control. It's choosing to stay grounded in your own well-being, even if others are in chaos. It's about stepping back from trying to manage or control outcomes that aren't yours to actually carry. And it's choosing compassion over control. It's stepping back with compassion, not with bitterness. It's saying, I care about you, but I'm not going to lose myself trying to fix this for you. In a codependent relationship, rescuing and enabling often keep unhealthy patterns alive. By stepping back, you stop shielding the other person from consequences and start allowing growth for both of you. Detachment protects your emotional health, and it gives that other person the chance to take ownership of their life. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you love yourself too. So what does healthy detachment actually look like? Your partner forgets to pay a bill, and you're tempted to swoop in and fix it. But detachment sounds like, I trust you'll figure this out. If you need help brainstorming options, I'm open to that, but I'm not going to cover it for you. What about a friend? Say a friend calls repeatedly to vent, but never takes steps to change their situation. And detachment in that kind of situation might sound like, I hear that you're struggling and I care about you, but I can't keep having the same conversation. If you want to talk about possible solutions, I'm here. These responses allow you to stay connected without overfunctioning in these situations. So let's try this together. I want you to think about a relationship where you feel drained or overly responsible. I want you to then ask yourself, what part of this situation is mine to carry? And what part belongs to the other person? If I step back, what would happen? What fears come up for me when I imagine letting go of control? What's one phrase I could practice saying that communicates care while honoring my limits? I want you to write these down. You might not use them today, but even rehearsing healthier responses prepares you to act differently when the opportunity comes. One of the biggest challenges in recovering from codependence is realizing how much of your identity has been tied to what you do for others. For many people, worth has been measured by being the caretaker, the rescuer, or the dependable one who never lets anyone down. But what we truly know is that your value does not come from how much you give or how indispensable you are to someone else. Your value comes from who you actually are. So breaking free from the codependent cycle means rediscovering your own identity outside of actually being needed. In codependent dynamics, self-worth often gets outsourced. Instead of feeling whole from within, you look to your partner's approval, their needs, or their happiness as proof that you actually matter. This keeps you in a cycle where if you feel like your partner is happy, then you actually feel valuable. If your partner is upset, you feel worthless or responsible. Your identity shifts depending on how much you're actually needed. Rebuilding self-worth outside of relationships breaks this cycle. It allows you to stand in your value, whether you're in a relationship or not. It helps you to make choices based on your desires, not just on others' expectations. It helps you to experience relationships as an addition to your life, not the foundation of your identity. So building self-worth outside the relationship often starts small. And here are some ways it can show up. You can start to kind of reclaim your hobbies and your passions, going back to those things that you enjoy and love doing: painting, hiking, cooking, music you once loved but set aside for your partner. It's about reclaiming your own desires. What do you want for your life, for today, for this season, for this future? It's about naming your preferences. Instead of automatically agreeing with others, pausing to ask yourself, what do I want? Whether it's what kind of food you enjoy, what movie you pick, or what you want to do with your weekend. It's about rebuilding self-worth, learning that you are enough, just as you are, not because of what you give or do for others, but simply because you are who you are. Celebrating your achievements, taking pride in your work, in your education, in your parenting, or your even personal goals, not waiting for someone else to affirm you. And it's about reconnecting with your independence. Who are you when you're not managing someone else's life? And then nurturing that independence. Doing things on your own, like traveling solo, or taking a class, or making a decision without seeking approval. Each of these choices reinforces the message that I am enough and I matter, apart from what I give to others. So let's imagine someone who has always let their partner choose the vacation destination, believing their role is just to go along to keep the peace. Breaking the cycle might mean saying, this year I'd like us to try the mountains because that's what feels restorative to me. It may sound small, but it's symbolic. It's the practice of recognizing and voicing your own desires and giving them weight equal to your partner's. So take a moment and reflect. What are 3 things that you enjoy that have nothing to do with your partner or your relationship? When was the last time you made a choice simply because it made you happy? How do you currently define your worth? And what would it look like to define it by who you are, not just by what you do for others? Write down your answers. If you struggle to find them, that's okay. Rediscovering yourself is a process, and every step you take is part of that healing journey. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but every small step, it matters. Saying no, choosing yourself, letting someone else handle their own choices, or spending time on what brings you joy. A great example of this shift comes from Eat, Pray, Love. Julia Roberts' character, Liz, realizes that she's been living a life defined by others, a marriage, a home, roles that no longer reflect who she is. She reaches a breaking point and chooses to step away, setting boundaries for herself and seeking a life outside of those patterns. Through travel, reflection, and new experiences, she begins to rediscover what she wants, what food she enjoys, what spirituality means to her, and how to live with independence. While it's dramatized for this film, it captures an important truth. Breaking the cycle of codependence often requires courage to step back, to say no, and to rebuild your sense of self apart from anyone else. Breaking free from codependence isn't just about stopping unhealthy behaviors. It's about replacing them with healthier ones. Codependent Anonymous, or CoDA, outlines recovery patterns that show us what growth actually looks like in action. And here are some of the key shifts that they emphasize. You want to move from people-pleasing to honoring your own needs. Instead of automatically saying yes to avoid conflict or rejection, recovery means learning to check in with yourself first. Example, when a friend asks for help moving, rather than immediately agreeing, you pause and ask, do I have the energy for this right now? If the answer is no, you actually honor that and say so. You want to move from control to acceptance. In codependence, you may try to manage or fix your partner's behavior to feel safe. In recovery, you learn to accept that others are responsible for their own lives. Instead of checking your partner's phone or constantly worrying about their choices, you acknowledge their actions are theirs. I can control myself, but not their behaviors. Another one is moving from self-neglect to self-care. Codependence often means pushing your needs aside, but recovery involves actively nurturing your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Instead of skipping your therapy session because your partner wants company, you keep the appointment. You value your growth. Another one is moving from denial of feelings to honest expression. Many codependents minimize or deny their feelings to keep the peace. Recovery means acknowledging your emotions and expressing them with clarity and with respect. It's about saying, I felt hurt when you canceled our plans last minute, instead of pretending you're fine. And another one is moving from depending on others for worth to developing your own self-esteem. Codependence ties your value to being needed or loved. Recovery teaches that your worth is inherent and not conditional. It's celebrating your own accomplishments, whether or not your partner notices and affirms them. It's about being proud of yourself. And why these patterns matter? Each one of these shifts breaks a link in the codependent cycle. They help you step out of rescuing, overfunctioning, and self-erasure and move towards healthier interdependence, where two whole people meet as equals. So let's take a moment to reflect on these shifts right now. Which of these shifts feels most relevant to you right now? Where in your life have you already made small steps towards recovery, even if you didn't realize it? And what's one area you'd like to begin practicing differently this week? Remember, the recovery process starts by choosing new patterns, little by little, until they become your new way of living and loving. So breaking the cycle of codependence takes courage. It takes patience and it takes practice. It's not about cutting people off or becoming selfish. It's about creating space for mutual respect, balance, and authenticity. It's about honoring your own needs while allowing others to take responsibility for theirs. As you reflect this week, I encourage you to try one small act of independence. Say no when you mean no. Do something that brings you joy just for yourself, or let someone else handle a responsibility you normally would take over, and notice how it feels. In our next episode, we're going to talk about recovery and healing, learning self-compassion, rebuilding your identity, and embracing healthy patterns of love. We'll bring everything together to explore what it means to live free from codependence and what healthy interdependence can actually look like. Until then, I want you to sit with this question. What does it mean for me to build a life where my worth comes from within, not from what I do for others? As always, thank you for joining me today on Pint-Sized Therapy. If you found this conversation meaningful, I invite you to leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and share with your family and friends. Come visit my website at pintsizedtherapy.com and my Etsy shop at pintsizedtherapy.etsy.com, where you will find resources to accompany our various discussions and encourage you to continue your wellness journey. Once again, I am Dr. Aletha Clark. Until next time, remember to protect your peace and take care of your mental health.